Princess Anne had entered the private court chamber expecting a procedural ruling. Instead, she heard the name of her late father spoken beside a document she had never been allowed to see. As the judge revealed that Prince Philip's forbidden decree had been concealed inside a restricted royal archive, and that Camilla had known of its existence, Anne's expression hardened, her hands froze against the table, and the entire balance of the royal family shifted in a single breath. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The closed hearing tightened around her. The Royal Chancery Court, a fictional court handling disputes over royal property and sealed instructions, had gathered to decide who controlled Philip's correspondence, military papers, and personal orders. Whoever held those records could shape his legacy. The ruling could expose whether palace authority erased his final command. The judge named the document. The Windsor Legacy Decree was a binding instruction giving Anne sole protection over Philip's private archive, while barring any monarch's spouse from transferring, editing, or absorbing it into another household. Camilla did not move. Charles sat several feet away, staring at the table, as though silence might protect him from his sister's eyes. Anne heard her father's handwritten explanation, entered into the court record. Philip had chosen her because she would defend the crown without turning his memory into a tool of influence. The words struck hard. She had spent a lifetime earning his trust, yet someone had decided that trust could be hidden and quietly replaced by convenience. The king looked up. Anne met his gaze and saw the question neither dared voice. Had Charles failed to protect the decree, or had the truth been kept from him? Camilla stayed still, while her solicitor covered his notes. When the judge asked whether she denied seeing the sealed order, the queen consort offered no answer. Court records then revealed the path of concealment. Soon after Philip's death, the decree had been removed from its original registry and placed inside a restricted cabinet authorized through Camilla's household office. That prevented Anne from exercising authority that had legally belonged to her from the beginning. It also suggested planning, not confusion. During the pause, an usher handed Anne a page. She lowered herself into a wooden chair, read the paragraph twice, then pressed one finger against Philip's signature. Beneath her name stood another, written in his hand, William. But before Anne could understand why her father had placed such extraordinary faith in her, she had to face the three people whose silence had allowed his final command to disappear. The decree was more than a legal weapon. It was a final judgment, written by a father who had watched his family fracture under pressure. For Anne, it carried the weight of love and duty. For Charles, it exposed a devastating failure inside his own reign. And for Camilla, it threatened something far greater than embarrassment. Because Philip had not merely excluded her from his private legacy. He had explained, in painful detail, why she could never control it. Anne carried those words into the corridor like a wound she refused to show. She had shared Philip's bluntness, his discipline, and his belief that royal duty meant service rather than performance. That history mattered because he had trusted very few people with his private judgment, and because choosing his daughter placed responsibility above rank. Camilla had followed a different path. Her household had pushed a consolidation program, a plan to place private archives, letters, and legacy projects under one central office. On paper, it promised order. In practice, it gave whoever controlled that office the power to decide which memories remained untouched and which became easier for the present court to manage. Charles approached his sister slowly. "I did not know," he said. Anne looked directly at him. "Then you should have asked why father's voice disappeared." The king flinched, but he did not defend himself. Protecting his wife would deepen Anne's humiliation. Condemning Camilla would expose a breach inside the royal household he was meant to lead. Anne's anger sharpened when she remembered family gatherings where Camilla had spoken warmly of Philip. The queen consort had praised his loyalty, repeated his jokes, and raised a glass to his memory while the decree remained hidden. That contrast made the concealment personal. This was not only about access to papers. It was about allowing a daughter to mourn without knowing her father had left her a final duty. The decree's wording struck even harder. Philip had ordered Anne to prevent his records from being softened, repurposed, or rearranged to satisfy the comfort of those who come later. A constitutional witness, meaning a trusted royal, tasked with confirming that an instruction remained protected, had also been named beneath her signature. William's name changed everything. The prince admitted through a recorded private conversation, entered into the court file, that he had never seen the decree. Yet he remembered Philip pressing a sealed brass key into his hand during one family gathering 3 years earlier. He had kept it without understanding why. Its unopened lock seemed to accuse everyone present. That painful answer led William back to the exact evening when Philip realized his final wishes were already in danger. Every royal rupture has a moment that appears ordinary, until history reveals what was truly happening. For Philip, that moment came during a private Windsor dinner, when a casual proposal crossed an invisible line. Camilla believed she was discussing efficient management of aging records. Philip heard something else. A plan that could allow future households to reshape the past. He said little that evening, but before sunrise, he had made the decision that would one day leave Anne frozen inside a courtroom. William returned to that memory, with the brass key resting in his palm. 3 years earlier, Philip had grown uneasy about papers belonging to dead royals being reorganized around the needs of the living court. That mattered because changing a file's title, location, or context could change how history judged the people inside it. The dinner began quietly. Camilla proposed merging Philip's correspondence and charitable records into a central collection supervised through the sovereign's household after his death. The sovereign's household meant the staff and offices serving the reigning monarch. To her, consolidation promised order. To him, it placed truth beneath palace control. Philip set down his fork. He asked whether central supervision would allow letters to be withheld, renamed, or separated from their original meaning. Camilla answered, sensitive material sometimes required responsible management to protect the family and the institution. The queen consort saw discretion. He saw permission for comfort to outrank truth. Then one phrase ended the evening. Camilla described several letters as unhelpful remnants of another court. Philip's face hardened. Those papers recorded loyalties, arguments, and failures that relatives disliked. Yet he believed embarrassment was not a reason to rewrite memory. He rose, ended the discussion, and left without offering the reassurance she expected. Before breakfast, Philip summoned his solicitor. A documented account later entered into the court record showed that he dictated the Windsor Legacy Decree that morning. The decree, a formal written command governing his private legacy, named Anne as protector, William as future witness, and barred any sovereign spouse from overruling either role. Philip met William alone afterward. He removed a brass key, closed the prince's fingers around it, and said, "One day, you may be asked whether memory belongs to the powerful or to the truth." William kept it, never knowing which lock it opened. A footman's recorded testimony added darkness. Camilla had been seen outside Philip's library while the decree was being sealed. She may not have heard every word, but she knew something final had been created. Years later, that forgotten key would be placed between Anne and Camilla as the two women finally confronted what had happened behind the library's locked door. There were no aides in the room, no lawyers to soften the language, and no cameras to turn pain into performance. Anne entered carrying a copy of Philip's decree. Camilla was already waiting beside the fireplace. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Then Anne placed the document on the table and asked the one question the court had not answered. How could someone sit beside the king, speak publicly of loyalty, and privately bury the last command of his father? Charles had authorized the meeting at Clarence House, his residence, hoping his sister and wife could speak before the court imposed sanctions on Camilla's household. Those sanctions meant limits on what her staff could control. He remained outside, knowing that one wrong word could fracture both his marriage and his family. Anne did not ease into the accusation. She said Camilla had used Philip's death to widen control over records he had placed beyond her reach. The queen consort held her ground, but her voice tightened. She insisted the decree's language would have caused a family war during Charles's fragile transition to the throne. Camilla then admitted what the courtroom silence had hidden. She had seen the decree after Philip's death. A senior courtier, she said, had described it as a personal memorandum, not an enforceable royal instruction. The explanation came from her documented account prepared for the hearing, but Anne heard only another attempt to place responsibility somewhere else. Anne reached into the folder and produced the registry receipt. She pushed it across the table. Camilla looked down, slowly removed her glasses, and saw her initials beside the words, "Retain outside principal index." A principal index was the archive's main catalog, the record that allowed authorized family members to locate protected documents. Keeping the decree outside it had made Philip's command invisible. "I was trying to stop everything from collapsing," Camilla whispered. Anne stared at her. "You stopped nothing. You only chose who would be crushed." The words landed harder than anger. Camilla admitted she feared losing Charles, feared being blamed for another royal rupture, and feared the decree would prove Philip never trusted her. Anne answered that fear did not give anyone the right to erase a father's final voice from his daughter. Then Camilla revealed one fact. Charles's private secretary had been informed about the decree. The king's private secretary was the senior official managing his duties and correspondence. Anne turned toward the closed door, suddenly unsure whether Charles had been protected from the truth or protected by it. Yet the deepest shock was no longer what Camilla had done, but how many powerful hands had helped keep Philip's decree beyond Anne's reach. Secrets inside a palace rarely survive because of one person. They survive because several people each perform one small act and convince themselves it means nothing. A file is renamed. A registry entry is delayed. A key is transferred without explanation. By the time Philip's decree vanished, no single official believed they had buried it. But inside the court's evidence bundle, Anne discovered a chain of decisions that led from Camilla's private office to the very heart of Charles's household. Anne followed that chain line by line. Royal archives depended on registrars, trustees, private secretaries, and household authorizations, meaning no senior royal could move protected records through personal wishes alone. That mattered because each signature created responsibility, and each missing entry showed how many people had chosen procedure over truth. The court traced 3 transfers. First, the decree moved from Philip's original registry into a temporary review file. Then it passed into Camilla's household under a new reference number. Finally, it entered a restricted cabinet without Anne's name attached. Nothing had been destroyed. Everything had been made harder to find. Sir Malcolm Harrow broke his silence through a sworn written testimony submitted to the hearing. Charles's former private secretary admitted receiving a warning that Philip had left a binding instruction, but he feared revealing it would destabilize the king's marriage during the first months of the reign. He called his choice protective. Anne saw it as surrender. Charles read Harrow's account alone. He removed his spectacles, set the pages down, and remained silent. The confession cut deeply because officials had used loyalty to him as permission to betray his father. It also exposed a brutal truth. The monarch had been protected from a scandal only by allowing the people closest to him to create one. Harrow confirmed another detail. Camilla had requested that Philip's archive remain under temporary household review until Anne's authority could be reconsidered. A household review was an internal process used to examine who controlled royal material. In this case, temporary control had become a quiet attempt to weaken a permanent command. The judge ended that argument. Anne's authority had never been legally suspended, so every archive transfer, charitable appointment, property decision, and release of private correspondence made without her approval was invalid from Philip's death onward. Charles summoned his sister. He turned the decree toward her and said, "Father trusted you with what I failed to protect." Anne closed the folder. She offered no comfort. "What will you do now?" she asked. The room seemed to narrow around him. Charles's answer would determine whether the monarchy defended its own comfort or accepted the consequences of the truth it had tried to contain. The consequences arrived before the palace could prepare a statement. Access cards stopped working. Scheduled archive meetings vanished from calendars. Trustees withdrew signatures from decisions they had approved only days earlier. Camilla had spent years building influence through patience and proximity to the king, but the court's ruling stripped away that protection within hours. The most painful moment came not in public, but at a locked Windsor door, where she discovered Philip's world had been returned to Anne without a word. The ruling moved faster than palace loyalty. It restored Anne's control over Philip's archives, personal effects, legacy charities, and restricted rooms connected to his private work. A legacy charity was an organization carrying forward a royal figure's causes after death. Control mattered because it shaped not only memory, but appointments, access, and public purpose. Camilla reached the Windsor Library expecting delay, not refusal. Her access card failed twice. The security officer lowered his voice and explained that Anne alone could now authorize entry. The Queen Consort placed her palm against the dark wood and remained there for several seconds. Hearing footsteps behind her, she lowered her hand, straightened her coat, and walked away before anyone saw her crying. Charles knew she had gone alone. He had considered joining his wife, but the order restoring his sister's authority waited on his desk. Signing it meant accepting that Camilla's household review had no legal standing. Refusing would place the king against both the court and Philip's written command. His pen touched the page. He signed. Anne entered the library with no sense of victory. She discovered sealed letters already opened, renamed, and separated from the instructions that explained their meaning. That mattered, because a document without context could be made to say something its writer never intended. It also proved that the concealment had already begun changing Philip's legacy. One altered file carried a warning. In a private assessment preserved within the archive, Philip wrote that emotional loyalty must never replace constitutional discipline. Constitutional discipline meant following the rules that limit royal power, even when personal love makes those rules painful. Anne read the sentence twice, knowing it judged Charles as sharply as Camilla. The decision before her became darker. She could use the evidence to remove the Queen Consort from every institution Philip had touched. Instead, Anne sent William a private message asking him to come without advisors. She needed the future king to decide whether justice demanded punishment, restoration, or a balance neither of them would find easy. As Camilla retreated into isolation, Anne and William faced a choice that would reveal whether Philip's decree was meant to settle an old grievance or protect the monarchy's future. Anne could have used the court's ruling as a weapon. William could have demanded Camilla's complete removal from every legacy institution connected to his grandparents. Instead, they met alone, inside Philip's restored library, surrounded by the records others had tried to control. On the desk lay the brass key William had carried for years without understanding it. When Anne placed it beside the decree, both realized Philip had not chosen them because he wanted revenge. He chose them because he expected restraint. Silence changed the meaning of the room. Anne and William reviewed the decree without advisors, palace officials, or Charles present. That mattered, because no one could soften the words, redirect the blame, or turn Philip's command into a political compromise. The decision now belonged to the daughter he trusted and the grandson he had prepared. William reached the final paragraph first. Philip ordered them to protect historical truth while avoiding unnecessary humiliation of any living family member. Historical truth meant preserving records in their original form, even when they caused pain. The instruction denied them the comfort of revenge, just as firmly as it denied Camilla the power of concealment. The prince admitted his anger. Camilla had allowed letters tied to his grandfather to be renamed, separated, and hidden beneath household authority. He wanted every role connected to Philip removed from her immediately. Anne understood. Her first instinct had been harsher. Erase the Queen Consort from every institution her father had touched and make the loss public. Anne stopped herself. Using the decree as a personal weapon would betray the very purpose Philip had written into it. He had anticipated suppression and included a remedy. She would restore the archive. William, as constitutional witness, would ensure that no future monarch or consort could control private royal history alone. A constitutional witness was the family member responsible for confirming that protected instructions remained enforced. The choice became clear. Anne would not seek Camilla's public expulsion, but the Queen Consort had to surrender all authority over Philip's legacy and acknowledge the decree before the family. Mercy would protect her dignity. Accountability would protect the truth. Anne returned the brass key to William. He closed her hand around it again and said, "Grandfather gave it to me so I could find the door. He trusted you to know when it should be opened." William carried their decision to Charles. The prince offered him no comfortable middle ground. The palace could release a defensive statement, or it could release the complete truth, but not both. Their decision spared Camilla from total destruction, but it could not shield her from a nation watching the palace doors for an explanation. By sunrise, the secret that had survived behind palace walls was printed in letters large enough to be read across a crowded railway platform. The court ruling had become more than a family dispute. It was now a national argument about memory, power, and whether royal history belonged to those who inherited it or those willing to protect it. Outside Windsor Castle, the public did not gather for celebration. They gathered in stunned silence, holding photographs of Philip. Buckingham Palace confirmed the decision before breakfast. The official statement announced that Anne had assumed immediate control of Philip's archive and legacy instructions. An archive was the protected collection of his letters, records, and private orders. The transfer mattered because it placed his memory beyond the influence of the household that had tried to reorganize it. Broadcasters treated the ruling as the gravest challenge to Camilla's authority since Charles became king. Supporters argued that she had acted to protect him during a vulnerable transition. Critics answered with one brutal point: emotional loyalty could not justify hiding a binding command. The debate divided sympathy, but it did not change the evidence. Anne watched the argument with growing discomfort. She had become a symbol of institutional integrity, yet she hated hearing Philip's final wishes reduced to headlines and angry panels. Her father had written the decree to protect truth, not to turn his family's pain into public entertainment. Every cheer for her felt tied to another humiliation for Camilla. The sharpest moment came at Windsor. The fictional Daily Chronicle printed Philip in naval uniform beneath the headline, "The Order She Hid." At Cambridge Gate, a former serviceman placed a handwritten card beside his photograph. It read, "His duty deserved your honesty." The message spread across evening broadcasts and became the sentence the palace could no longer escape. Camilla finally responded through a signed acknowledgement released during the evening bulletin. She admitted withholding the decree and accepted permanent removal from decisions concerning Philip's archives. The Queen Consort did not offer excuses. Charles approved the release, knowing that defending her now would deepen the damage to both of them. Anne watched the Windsor crowd on a muted television. She saw Philip's photograph raised above the railings, switched off the screen, and rose without speaking. The nation expected a triumphant statement. Instead, she walked toward the room where the decree had first been sealed, ready to face Charles, Camilla, and William without applause between them. The public had delivered its judgment in headlines and handwritten cards, but the verdict that mattered most would be spoken behind one closed door. The final meeting did not end with victory. It ended with 4 members of a wounded family standing around the desk of a man whose absence had exposed all of them. Anne held the decree. William held the brass key. Charles stood beside Camilla, no longer protected by titles or advisors. What followed was not a negotiation over power, but a reckoning over trust. And the monarchy survived it only because the truth was finally allowed to matter more than anyone's pride. Anne opened the meeting without anger. The Windsor Library belonged under her protection, and the settlement made that authority permanent. A constitutional witness confirmed protected instructions remained enforced, while an independent archivist prevented one household from controlling the records. Camilla spoke first. Through a statement read aloud before the family, she admitted fear had guided her choices. She believed the decree would isolate her from Charles, and confirmed Philip viewed her as an outsider. The Queen Consort asked for no sympathy. Fear had become concealment. Charles faced his sister. He said his desire to protect his marriage had blinded him to the silence around their father's wishes. The king accepted responsibility for decisions made in his name, and for never asking why Anne had been excluded from Philip's instructions. Anne delivered the judgment no one expected. She would seek no further punishment. Philip had demanded protection of truth, not the public destruction of a woman who had already lost the authority she tried to preserve. Mercy would not erase betrayal, but revenge would repeat it. Camilla signed the renunciation, a formal surrender of control over Philip's legacy. She placed the restricted archive key in Anne's hand and apologized without qualification. Anne accepted the apology, But her silence made one boundary clear. Forgiveness would never mean pretending the decree had not been buried. William watched the settlement reshape the future. No spouse, sovereign, or household could privately rewrite the legacy of the dead again. Charles remained king. Camilla remained beside him. Anne emerged not as a conqueror, but as the daughter who restored her father's voice. Anne placed the decree inside its original cabinet, turned the brass key, and handed it to the independent archivist. Charles lowered his head. Camilla stepped back. William watched the cabinet close, not to bury the truth, but to protect it. And with that final turn of the key, Prince Philip's command was no longer forbidden. Anne's duty was no longer denied, and the monarchy finally understood that protecting the crown could never again mean hiding the truth. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.